Hello and welcome back. I'm Demis Hellen and this is the final episode of my three-part series where we're looking at some of the new features of Cubase 14. We're looking at the modulators in this episode and how we can quickly make 2 clicks and join parameters together and control them using the modulators. So without further ado, let's jump in and have a look at what they do. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the Modulator tab. So this is new to Cubase 14. I use these personally because we can achieve modulation in 2 steps. Instead of using a separate plugin and setting up the preset and setting up the settings for that, we can just click, and we've got them connected and then we can just make the adjustments. So I'm going to show you how these work. So we've got this bass here, the knock bass as I've called it. It is the beating ring preset, and you're going to think, if you're a Boris Brejcha fan, that it is part of the Space Diver album. I think it's track number 4 or number 3 on there, and you'll recognize that bass. So you might think that already sounds like it's got a little bit of volume shaping on. It sounds like it's pumping already. It's not. If we jump into the MIDI, you can see here at the bottom on the MIDI, the first on-beat bass is actually hitting about half the volume. So it sounds a little bit like volume shaping to start with. And it just gives us a head start and a bit of a smoother transition when we do use some volume shaping. So we're going to use the shaper here. So just to have a quick look at everything, we've got the LFO, and that is oscillating the LFO, and we can change the shape, the pattern, the speed, and we can control parameters like, let's just say, the panning back and forth. Just directly from here, we can just click, and we've got it added. Don't worry, I will show you how to add them. Then we have the envelope follower, and this is great for adding extra details to transients. We can make a little bit of transient shaping. We can duck out certain elements, such as reverb, for example, when a sound hits, and then fade it in. There's all that sort of stuff we can do there. Shaper, we can use this as a sort of like volume shaper side chain effect like this and create that sort of shape. That's what we're going to use in a second. We can use the macro control, and we can attach this to many parameters just like the rest of them we can, and we could control the cutoff and the resonance of a filter on a synth, for example, with this control knob here without having to dive into the synth every time. Finally, the step modulator, you'll recognize this. It's actually a plugin already within Cubase, but this makes it much easier to use and attach it to parameters. And finally, you'll have noticed there that there is a mod script section as well. And on the mod script, if we click that, we can actually design our own modulation type. So for those that want to get a bit more in depth. So I'm going to delete all of these. And we're going to use the envelope shape, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways we can use this. So first of all, let's set this up like we just saw. If you want to get a bit more gritty and more precise, we can change the resolution of this grid. I'm going to make a little drop at the end just to avoid any clicks and pops that can happen from the volume going from sort of full volume to nothing. And we can set that to loop mode, which is automatically done, as you can see from this visual, or we can set one shot. So it'll only hit when that sound appears. We can also choose all these presets down here, the time base and the phase, so where that starts in the process. So we want to leave it at 0 and set this to quarter notes. So it's simulating like the kick is side chaining the bass, but we're actually volume shaping. And there's 2 ways we can do this. We can jump into the synth that we're going to control. Click on the plus, automatically wants to learn what to connect to. Click the parameter. Voila, we have instant volume shaping, and then we can control how that shapes down here using some of these settings. So we can choose this to be bipolar, like it's automatically doing, or we can choose it to be unipolar, so it's just affecting from one position to one other position, plus or minus, and we can control whether we want that muted and just bypassed or on. So because this was set to 0 dB straight up, this is simulating the same position, but it's actually increasing the volume from this point. So with that little marker, we can drag this down. So it's rising the volume to that full volume now, as you can see here, from that volume, and it's going to give us a nice realistic pump effect. Let's just hear that in context. And we can make it less harsh using this slider down here. Let's do less. Another way we can do this is if we turn this off I'm just going to make sure this is back to close to 0 dB. We can attach this to another plugin, for example. So we could use the volume control plugin here from Cubase. Let's turn this on. Let's put this to 0. Click, click. We've attached them, and now it's volume shaping using this plugin, so we don't have to affect the master out of the synth, especially if you have other plugins in the chain that require that level to come out. We can put this at the end and volume shape it at the end. So I'm going to make this unipolar. And it does exactly the same thing. If you wanted to drift some of the parameters in the synth, let's just say we want the panning to move back and forth as an example. I'm just looking for where the panning is on here. There, pan. If we use this on the master envelope, we can choose the LFO. We can say learn, click on pan, and now you can see it's oscillating that pan back and forth. And we can change the settings and change the pace and everything there. So you can see how quickly we can get these ideas out of the box from your head into Cubase, should we say. So for that, I'm just going to mute that. And then as another example, just to give you some ideas of what we can do, on these hats in the drum machine, so if we go to the instrument, choose the pad that you want, we can go to group, and then we can choose the output. So you can see open or closed hat number 3 here. I've set this to output number 3, so we can separate it into separate channels. Now, if we look at the mixer, we can see now that I've actually got a closed hi-hat track, but I've also got what we've called episode 2 for this project, but that is the drum machine. That's all the other sounds coming through that one channel. But you can see those hats are isolated now. And then as another example here in the same synth, we can use what we call the macro control. We can click the plus, we can click the filter, and we can also add another plus, and we can click the resonance, which is here. And then you can see it'll open up another section, so we could add another one in. Let's just say we want to control, let's think, the attack. And we can set different values for each one, so it will move them in unison. So you can see now on the synth, it's moving all 3 parameters whilst I'm turning this macro control. So very intuitive, and you can just see how quickly I attach them, and then you can obviously automate this and use an automation curve on the actual arranger and make them move. So you're using just one automation lane instead of 3. You've just got instant results there. So it's really quick, really intuitive, and it works really well when you just want to get those ideas down on the page. So with that, that is a few of the modulators there. We can use other things in there to control other places, like say the envelope follower. This is going to work a little bit different. If we was to jump into here, you can see it's picking up the audio level, and we can control another parameter. Let's just use the built-in reverb. So we can say click, learn, and say we want it to go the opposite way. So essentially what I'm trying to achieve there is that audio level is coming in, and I'm trying to make it read, turn that reverb down when the sound first hits, so you get that nice dry bass, and then open it back up based on the audio level coming out, and bring it back up to level when the bass has hit. So you can make it react a little bit more responsive. So now you can hear it's quite dry, so let's bring this up. So you can keep it nice and dry at the beginning and then have it fill with reverb or whatever effect you want. So this would be great for vocals, great for drum parts where you want some gated effects. You can use this to create that gated effect, I suppose. So there's many uses that we can use all these for, and you can see how quickly we can click them and just add them to whatever we need to control. And then finally, just to finish, I've created a quick step modulator here, and we've created what looks like a sample and hold, but it's a regulated one, so we can see it's going to be the same pattern over and over. It's set to 16ths, and you can see it's set to basically on, off, so it's jumping around. If you want to make it a bit smoother, you can do it like this, so it moves and it slides between those different parameters, and we can do it that way, so it's a little bit smoother. But we're just going to use that traditional way, and we can attach these to parameters as well. So let's jump into the bass. Let's go back to the front page, and let's just say we want to jump up that distortion, for example. So we can click plus, learn, and it's now going to move that around erratically depending on how you set it, and it'll give you different distortion values. Let's change it to bit reduction. So now you can get that really unique sound to it. Obviously, it's pushed it into the background. I've made some random edits here, but you can see that increases the bit reduction and gives it a bit of a gritty feel in certain places. In other ones, it takes it away. It's really useful for creating unique patterns that sound random to the music and the listener. So really handy little features, and I'm just showing you really off-the-cuff examples, but you can hear how powerful these are. So that is the modulators in Cubase 14. Hopefully you know a lot more now about those modulators, so you can start making tracks quicker and editing those parameters much quicker as well. So there we are. That is the end of this series. In the first episode, we looked at how to synthesize a drum and a clap, and then we looked at how to utilize those in the pattern editor, and then we've moved on to the modulators and how we can modulate parameters within Cubase 14 in just 1 and 2 clicks. Learn, click the parameter, and we've got a connection. And then finally, that gives way to, like, for example, that macro control. We can now just make one automation lane in Cubase to control multiple parameters, so you don't have loads of automation. You have to do each one individually. You can just do one overall once it's set up. So I've been Demis Hellen. I thank Steinberg for inviting me to create these videos for the Cubase channel, and hopefully I will see you again in the future with another series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.